in the New King James Version. It simply says this: for our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. Our light affliction. That's what he says here. So really, if I had to tag this text with the topic, I would simply say there's just no comparison. There's just no comparison to what I'm dealing with and what I'm going through as opposed to what I shall see. It's in Romans chapter 8 where Paul says in Romans chapter 8 verse number 18, he says, for I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared to the glory which shall be revealed in us. I reckon that the sufferings of this present time, when we're looking at the present time, he says, I reckon that the sufferings of this present time cannot even be compared to the glory which shall be revealed. Now, shall be is a future participial tense adverb. That's a phrase that is used to help us understand that it may not be the experience in which we're having right now, but it is one that we can count on having at some point, no matter where I am right now. Lord have mercy. No matter where I am right now, there's an experience that I can count on having at some point because the fact that he says it shall be. The reconciliation that Paul has, he computed, he calculated, and he concluded that whatever he's contending with right now, it's all worth it based on what the end result is going to be. Can I tell you what else he says? And we know that all things, the good things, the bad things, the up things, the down things, the happy things, the sad things, and we know that all things work together for good to those who love the Lord and who are the called according to his purpose. Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 17, he says, listen, for our light affliction. Paul, are you kidding me? What do you mean, our light affliction? I don't know who I'm talking to today. I hope and pray that you find inspiration and upliftment in this message as much as I have preparing it for you today. Paul says our light affliction. Light affliction? What do you mean? Some of us are going through some heavy affliction. Some of us are dealing with affliction in our homes, affliction on our jobs, affliction in our bodies. And you're sitting here telling me that this is a light affliction? Well, you come off calling it light, Paul. Paul, he's obviously writing under inspiration. And Paul obviously knows of that in which he speaks. One thing that I love what my pastor said, and I'm telling you right now, boy, he blessed me today. I took a note. Let me find this note because I'm telling you right now, when I took that note, it spoke to me. He said, listen, you don't ever speculate on your experience. Don't speculate on your experience. Paul says this is a light affliction. Paul, how do you say a light affliction when the doctor's report is what it is? How do you say a light affliction when the peach slip is on my desk? How do you say a light affliction when the foreclosure notice is on my door? How do you say a light affliction when the repo man is in my driveway? How do you say light affliction when my husband has tripped out, my wife has played out, my kids are running out, my house is rotting out, my car is rusting out, my money has run. Is anybody in here? How do you say light affliction? Whatever your affliction is, Paul says, is really light. That's what he says. He says, whatever your affliction is, it's really light. I have 7 quick points I'm going to share with you. Somebody said 7. Don't worry. I'm going to run through them like a doggone sprinter. But I've got 7 reasons why what Paul says is true. I'm going to give them to you. Watch this. Number 1, here's the thing. Your affliction is light. When I look at this text, when you compare it to many others. Yeah, see, anytime, I remember my grandfather, Frank Henry Horn, my mother's dad, my mother's dad. I remember one time my grandfather, both grandfathers were pastors. And one thing that I appreciate about both my grandfathers is that they were both unconventional in their own ways. Both my dad's dad and my mom's dad. And so, Pawpaw, that's what we called him. I remember one time we were out there and we were out in the country And Lord have mercy, how I have such an appreciation for our country living now. Ooh, as a kid, I just didn't have it, but Lord have mercy. Peace and quiet, Lord Jesus. Thank you, Lord. Here's the point. I remember him talking to myself and Cameron. It was myself, Cameron, Myron, and a few of my other male cousins. And one of my cousins, Jeffrey, he was talking about how, he had a bad day, basketball practice and everything. It was terrible and everything. And so my grandfather told me, he said, I tell you what, he said, I got to go down to the hospital and visit some members. And he said, when I get ready to go, I want y'all to come with me. He said, so since you having such a bad day, you still walking, you talking, you have the activity of your limbs, you have the faculty of your brain, you are able to move on your own at your own strength. Since you're having a bad day, let me go show you how bad it could be. Why am I saying all that? I'm simply saying because Paul says your affliction is light. Your affliction is light when compared with that of many others. When we look at this, no matter how heavy your affliction may be, I want you to know that there's somebody's affliction even worse. Woo! Paul endured incredible afflictions. So he speaks from experience, but he says, even this that I'm dealing with is nothing compared to what someone else, who I may or may not even know. Listen, you're afflicted because you're trying to figure out how to downsize a house. There are some people afflicted because they ain't got no house. Woo! You're afflicted because you're trying to figure out how to cut back in your budget. There's some people who ain't got no budget. I know that's terrible grammar, but I know you understand what I'm saying here. Listen, Paul says your affliction is light, and it's light when you compare it to many others. I got to keep moving because I want to make sure I get all of this in. Your affliction is light when you compare it to others. He says here in 4:17, he says, for our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. Our light affliction, which is but for a moment. When you look at your affliction, you've got to understand point number 2. Your affliction is light when it's compared with your deserts. Let me see if I can help you with that. When it's compared with your deserts, it is unworthy to be compared to the woes of the lost. In other words, when you look at those, watch this. You're afflicted and you know God. You're afflicted and you've seen God. You're afflicted and you're acquainted with God. You're afflicted and you have the word. Can you imagine if you are dealing with whatever you may have dealt with, are dealing with, or will deal with? Can you imagine what it would be like if you had to go through it without God? Listen, your affliction is light when you compare it to your deserts. You and I both actually deserve a whole lot worse because there are those who are afflicted and hell-bound. I think you're missing the shout. There are those who are afflicted and don't know the God of peace. There are those who are afflicted and don't know the God of strength. There are those who are afflicted and don't know the God of joy. There are those who are afflicted and don't know the God of restoration. There are those who are afflicted and don't know the God of revival. But you and I, even though we're going through the afflictions in which we find ourselves experiencing, at least, when we compare it with the deserts, those who are deserted, those who are outside of the relationship with God and fellowship with God. Listen, because actually, if we tell the truth, we really deserve the woes of hell, and we would have them if it weren't for the grace of God through Christ in our life. Are you following what I'm saying? Listen, there's just no comparison. I'm going somewhere, y'all hang on with. There's no comparison. Point number three, let me keep going here. Your affliction is light. When I look at this text, it's light compared to the blessings you enjoy. Woo! It's light compared to the blessings you enjoy. When I look at the blessings you enjoy, look at this. I may not have a lot of money, but the Lord sure gives me a lot of sustenance. I may not have a lot of things, but that in which God gives me, things cannot purchase them anyway. The salvation in which I have, the righteousness in which I have, the adoption in which He's given me, the joy, this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. And I don't know about you, but I refuse to let the world take it away from me. I need you to understand the privileges in which we have as children of God. These afflictions that we are contending with, that you do contend with, or you shall contend with, I need you to know there ain't no comparison. It's light in comparison to the blessings that you and I enjoy. The blessing of being clothed in our right mind. The blessing of seeing a new day and knowing it's a new day. The blessing of having our sight. The blessing of having our hearing. The blessing of having our audibility. This stuff that you and I go through, I was thinking about it just this past week. I was like, man, it's been a crazy last couple of weeks. But then I thought about it when I read this text. Paul said, man, this is just a light affliction. Oh, man, this thing is light when you compare to the blessings in which we enjoy. The assurance of, listen, the one thing that blows my mind in this whole thing, he says, even in Romans 8 and 18, when I quoted it, he says, for I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared to the glory which shall be revealed in us. The assurance of future glories lets us know that whatever we're dealing with, can I tell you that God will never take more out of you than He puts into you? I know people always say that God doesn't put more on you than you're able to bear, but I beg to differ. God often puts more on us than we're able to bear because He desires for us to depend on Him to bear it up. Your affliction, I got to get out of here. Your affliction is light. Your affliction is light compared to that of the Lord Himself. I mean, when we really look at this, man, your affliction and my affliction, can you imagine? Jesus had to die for the sins of the world. You're concerned about whether or not your 401k is safe. Or you're concerned about whether or not your child is going to be of a certain status. Or you're concerned about whether or not people are going to see you in a certain light. Huh? No. When we compare this stuff to Jesus, He drained an ultimate cup of woe. I remember hearing Pastor Reginald Long, and Reggie was speaking on Friday. He talked about how whenever you go to pray, you got to have a conversation with the Creator, but you got to also be willing to accept the content in your cup. Ooh. Yeah, see, we all want to be like Jesus until we have to be. Yeah. But this affliction is light compared to Jesus. When we look at what's happening here, Jesus drained the ultimate cup of woe. Remember, He said, Father, if it be at all possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. The one who regulates our afflictions, watch this, you all, because Jesus took on the greatest. Would we agree? Would we agree? I'm going to give you a moment and let you interact with me. Just type agree. Would we agree that Jesus took on the greatest? Would we agree that no one has done for us more than Christ has done? Would we agree that no one could do for us more than what Christ has done? Would we agree that only God could have sent His only begotten Son to do for us what only we could do? Can we agree on that? And can we agree that no one's affliction has ever been greater than the one He took for us? I'm going to wait for you to hit agree. So here is the point I'm trying to make. Our afflictions are light. Our afflictions are light. Paul says are light. I was a little, man, I was feeling some type of way about Paul when he said, man, this is but a light affliction. Paul, you can't tell me about my afflictions. You can't tell me about my afflictions being light. Then I started thinking about it. Well, have I been in a shipwreck and had to make it on broken pieces, literally, in the sea? No. Well, have I been bitten by a serpent that jumped out of a fire and had to shake it off? No, not literally, but I've been bitten by some stuff. Have I found myself having to go and face Nero's chopping block? No, not really. Have I found myself caught off in the middle of a dungeon and way over in the midnight hour having to pray and give God praise for him to open up the jails? No, I haven't found myself in those places literally. So therefore, if I haven't found myself in those places literally, then I have to believe that if Paul says that even his afflictions were light, and I haven't been there. Now, let me be very clear. I need somebody to catch this. I may not have literally been in a dungeon, locked up with the Praetorian Guard down off in a prison, but there have been times in my life where I felt like that. I may not have literally been on the sea where the ship of life has broken up and I had to make it on broken pieces, but I have metaphorically been there. I may not have ever had to shake off a serpent after jumping out of a fire and biting me with the bite of betrayal, but I have metaphorically been there. But guess what? Metaphorically or literally, both of our afflictions combined, Paul and mine, Paul and yours, are still not as great as the one Jesus took on. Lord have mercy. Can we agree? Thank you so much. So here's the thing. Your affliction, light compared to others. It's light. That's when he says it's light. It's light when it's compared with your deserts. I mean the desertions. The one when I say with your deserts. I mean think about it. Think about it. It's unworthy to be compared to the woes of the lost when you talk about your afflictions, because we talk about the rich man and Lazarus. You remember that? One was carried away into Abraham's bosom, and one lifted up his eyes in hell. Man, it's one thing to have to deal with hell on this side, but can you imagine what it would be like to have to deal with hell on this side and have no assurance that you're going to miss hell in eternity? I won't go back to that. I'm done. Can you imagine what the afflictions are like? They're light, L-I-G-H-T. They are light when they're compared to the blessings in which we have oftentimes. And let me tell you this. Let me park here parenthetically. Pause for this station identification to give you this absolutely free infomercial and commercial break. If you are a chronic complainer, be delivered. I paused on purpose. If you're somebody that if you always have to find something wrong, be delivered. When you look at what God has done for you already, and I know it's cliche, but it's absolutely accurate. If the Lord doesn't do another thing for you, if the Lord doesn't do another thing for me, I can confirm that He's already done enough. I can confirm. And so, therefore, whatever affliction I find myself dealing with, whatever experience I have that I'm going through in the present time, I should have confidence in the experience that I'm going through in the present time because of the experiences I've already had in past times. And those experiences together ought to add up to a high expectation of what God is going to do in the future. Your light affliction is light. It's light compared to the Lord. It's light compared to the blessings that you and I enjoy. Let me give you these last 2 or 3 scattered remarks and I'm going to be out of your way. Your affliction is light in comparison to its benefits to you. Yeah. Right now, here's the thing I want you to understand. This is what I found out. I found this out. Lord have mercy, I found this out. When I have found myself going through the toughest of times, when I found myself going through the greatest challenges, when I found myself going through the darkest moments, when I found myself in the deepest recesses of life's tragedy, frustration, disappointment, or heartbreak, when I found myself there, even in those places, I've discovered that there are yet still light afflictions. Because what I realize is that when I found myself there, Your affliction is light in comparison to the benefits that it brings you. What benefits, McNeil, does those afflictions bring me when I'm in the deepest, darkest, and the toughest and most treacherous times in my life? What benefits, McNeil, does affliction bring me when I find myself heartbroken and frustrated? What benefits, McNeil, does affliction bring me when my mind is confused and my heart is being ripped and all things are going crazy? There are storms on left and south and north and east and right and up and down and all around. When there's storms going on in my life, afflictions, McNeil, what benefits do those afflictions bring? I'm glad you asked. First of all, can I tell you, the first benefit that I discovered that those afflictions bring is the fact that Jesus didn't lie when he said, "For my grace is sufficient." Yeah. It proves to me when I'm going through and when you're going through, it proves to us that God's sustaining grace has power. There is power in God's sustaining grace. Do I have one or two people on here that can say, "I know you're right, preacher"? Let me tell you what I mean. Didn't he keep you when you didn't think you could be kept? Didn't he make ways out of no way? Didn't he provide light in darkness? Didn't he make crooked ways straight? Didn't he bring high places down even in the midst of the affliction when you didn't have a dime in your pocket? God yet still provided. Listen, I don't need you to say amen. I'm telling you this is not what I think, and this is not what I believe. This is what I absolutely know for myself. The power of God's sustaining grace is one of the benefits that afflictions can bring. Listen, you thought it was you. You thought it was your education. You thought it was your economy. You thought it was your great planning. You thought it was your capacity. You thought it was your ability. It ain't got nothing to do with you. And I actually shout off of that. You and I both ought to be glad that it really don't have much to do with us at all. Because if we look back over the history of our own lives and run the roll and check the record and look at our resumes on the decisions in which we made down through the years, we would know that if we were in total control, this whole thing would be out of control anyway. Here's the thing. I'm almost out of here. I'm done. I promise. Your affliction is light in comparison to its benefits to you. It's light. It proves the power of God's sustaining grace. Not only that, it's designed by God. Here's what I found out. When I look at this text, it's designed by God. Afflictions, when you go through, when I go through, this is what I found out. And I've started doing this each and every time. Because I tell people all the time, listen, everybody's situation is not a Job situation. However, I heard my good friend, Dr. Howard John Wesley, was talking about, Job's righteousness is what got him picked out to be picked on. But here's the point I'm wanting to make there. Job was a righteous man. He was an upstanding man, right? The truth of the matter is that, and again, I'm just thinking of conversations in which I've had with guys down through the years. And I remember talking to Bishop Noel Jones. I was talking to Jones, and he and I were talking. And we were talking about the will of God. And I was talking about how, I think that it's crazy that people will let other people impose their will upon them or manipulate their will, especially if God doesn't usurp our will. And Jones says something that was very interesting. He says, God he doesn't usurp our will. He does not manipulate our will. He doesn't impose himself on our will. But what God does, and he said it is so delicious as I think of it right now, he uses situations and circumstances to bend our will. Ooh! To bend it. He won't change it. He won't impose it. And he won't usurp it, but he uses situations and circumstances to bend our will. What's the benefit to the affliction, McNeil? I'm glad you asked, because the affliction is designed by God to make changes in you. Yeah. Every time I've gone through affliction, I have begun to ask God, what I need to do? What do I need to do? What needs to happen? Not from a standpoint of penalty or punishment, but from a standpoint of promotion, because I know that there's something that you're wanting me to get to, but I can't. Watch this. Oh, somebody type this. You can't get to it until you go through it. Here's the thing. God designs these. He uses circumstances and situations to bend our will. And guess what? You still don't have to say yes to him. You still don't have to submit to him. You still don't have to get serious about him. You still don't have to start praying and start devoting your time to him and getting into this word. And one thing that I know is this: the more you know about the word, thank you, Dr. Lewis, the more you know about the word, the more you know about him. So you don't have to find yourself wondering about what you think about him when you need to know that you know him in situations that just simply don't make sense. In other words, there are times in my life, there have been times in your life, if you tell the truth, that it's just been all hell and high water. Everything is breaking loose. Dams have busted. It seems like floods are coming in from all over the place. And can I tell you, it is in those times that you don't need to praise God or worship God off of what you think about him. That's when you need to know about him. And there are times that even though our natural eyes cannot see, our faith lenses ought to come into clear focus and help us be able to navigate through the times. I'm thinking about the young man when Jesus anointed the eyes of the blind man who was blind from birth, and he told him to go and wash. How do you think he got there? The boy was blind. He had clay over his eyes. How do you think he got there? He didn't get there by sight. He walked by faith. What faith did he walk on? He walked on the faith in the Lord's word for him to go. Can I get you to see this? Come here for a moment and let me help you out. When the Lord told him to go, the fellow who couldn't see just went because he figured go was going to make the way. I got to keep going because I'm going to run out of time. But go will make the way. Ha! I'm preaching that. Go will make the way. Matter of fact, as you go, the way is made. I wish I had time to talk about the 10 lepers, but I don't. But as they went, I'll keep going. Last couple of points here I just want to share with you, and I'm out of here. I promise you I'm out of here. I promise you I'm out of here. Here's the thing. Your affliction is light because of its relative brevity. Your affliction is light because it's brief. One thing, here, let me put it to you this way. There's a song that says, I'm so glad trouble don't last always. Here's the point I'm trying to make when I talk about that. I'm talking about the fact that whatever you're going through, in the grand scheme of life, in the grand scheme of the time in which we have, look at what he says here. This light affliction, look at it, which is but for a moment. We understand that this affliction is light because it's just for a moment. Can I tell you, I don't know who I'm talking to today. I don't know who I'm talking to later on the rebroadcast, but whatever you find yourself dealing with, whatever you find, I found myself the last few weeks going through, feeling like, Lord, when is it going to ever end? And then I had to come to myself, and I realized, God, at some point, what I know is that greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. And what I do know is that you put more sustenance in me than sustenance in it. Just for a moment. It won't last always. Now, you can't get to it unless you go through it, but it won't last always. It must be viewed as relative. In other words, compare it to the overall span of life. This that you find yourself contending with for these few days, these few weeks, these few moments. Look at it over the entire span of your life. It's minor, it's minute, and it has to be viewed as relative. And so with that being said, not only look at it with the span over your entire life that you've lived up until this point, but look and see how dominant, prevalent, or relevant this affliction that you're going through or that you're contending with based on what Paul is saying here. Look and see how that adds up in all of eternity. That's the whole point I'm trying to make. It doesn't matter. The only thing you and I need to concentrate on is getting through it. Because we're going to get to it. Just concentrate on getting through it. Don't concentrate on how. Don't concentrate on when. Don't concentrate on where. Don't concentrate on what. Peter said it best. After that you've suffered a while, the Lord will then perfect you. He'll settle you. He'll strengthen you. He'll establish you. After you've suffered a while. How long is a while? It's an irreconcilable, incalculable amount of time that can only be reconciled when it's over. In other words, you will never know how long suffering a while is until you have come out of the suffering and look back to see how long suffering a while was. Preach back there. I'm out of here. I'm sitting down. Your affliction is light because of the brevity, in other words, the briefness of it. Look at it. Look at how this affliction compares to the entire amount of life that you've lived, and look at how this affliction compares to eternity. I'm done. When I tell you there's no comparison, here's the point. Your affliction is light in comparison to the glory that shall be revealed. If I look at this text, he says, for our light affliction, I'm reading New King James Version, which is but for a moment, is working for us. I got to keep going because I'm going to be good on time today. But he says, whatever you're dealing with, it's working for you right now. But not only is it working for you, it's working a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. In other words, Paul says, whatever you deal with, whatever you are dealing with, whatever you will deal with, there's just no comparison. Paul refers to a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory to let us know that there is just no comparison to the glory that's coming out of your story. There's no comparison to the product that's coming out of your process. There's no comparison to the triumph that's coming out of your trial. There's no comparison to the victory that's coming out of your battle. There's no comparison. This is just a light affliction. Handling the affliction right. When we handle it right, it increases our weight of glory. In other words, it's not about the fact that you went through it, but it's about how you go through it. It's about your attitude when you're going through it. It's about how you're walking when you're going through it. It's about how you're talking when you're going through it. Are you sad? Are you beaten down? Are you victimized? Are you walking through tribulation and trial and challenges and issues and heartbreak and disappointment and pain? Are you walking through it like the 3 Hebrew boys and say, listen, if you don't bring us out, we're going in like we already out. Do you hear what I'm saying? It's about how you handle the affliction. That's what increases the weight of your glory. That's what makes it all the sweeter. That's what makes it all the greater. That's what makes it all good. Listen, it can make us more of what God wants us to be when we go through this thing. And that's really what this discipleship walk is supposed to be about. It's really supposed to be about becoming more of what God wants us to be, not more of what we want to be. It's about us becoming more of what God wants us to be. And not only that, it can increase the weight of reward that's waiting on us. What do I mean by that? Man, all the tears. And listen, let me say this too. Because, my pastor said this too. Boy, it made a lot of sense when he said it. He said, listen, the one thing about it is that authentic worship comes not only from self-evaluation, but it also is not divorced from the reality of our mind. In other words, it's not to say that you shouldn't have situations and times in your life that you find yourself a little on the edge, that you find yourself a little dismayed, that you find yourself looking at the water instead of listening to the word. There may be some times that you find some slippage in the slope. But I need you to understand here that the truth of the matter is how we go through what we go through is going to determine how great we come out. Lord have mercy. How great we come out. How you go through what you go through. Not just going through, but how you go through what you go through will determine how great you come out. And I'll just say it like this because one of my favorite songs that I hear and have heard down through the years. Be not dismayed. Whatever betides, God will take care of you. Let me close here. There's just no comparison. There's no comparison to what we go through as opposed to what Jesus went through. There's just no comparison to the 125 Patibullion board that was placed on his back as he was whipped up Calvary's Hill, walking the Via Dolorosa. There's no comparison to nails that were in his hand, placed and hammered in his hand. There's no comparison to the rivets and the spikes that were nailed in his feet. There's no comparison to what you and I go through to the spear that was pierced in his side and the crown of thorns that was placed on his head. There's just no comparison to the weight of the sin of the world that was placed on him who knew no sin, who took on all the sins of the world. There's no comparison to how he died. He died, Lord have mercy. He died. There's no comparison to how he died. Whatever we go through, there's just no comparison. But can I tell you, there's one thing that I know. This is where we ought to shout. Because we're in him, all that he went through on that Friday, Paul said, for I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared to the glory which shall be revealed. All that he went through on that Friday, and all the speculation that was left on him on that Saturday, bright early Sunday morning, he got up with all power in his hands. And because he got up, I wish I had somebody. You are the type I can get up. I don't care where you are in life. I don't care what you're dealing with in life. I don't care what you're going through in life. I don't care what you're facing in life. Tell yourself you can get up. I wish I had somebody that could just high-five me on the screen. Just high-five me on the screen. I can get up no matter what I face. I don't care what the doctor says. I don't care what the job says. I don't care what the friends say. I don't care what the people say. I don't care what the report says. I can get up. Because there's just no comparison. Our afflictions are much a matter of our focus. It's what you focus on. I'm done. If you focus on the afflictions, they'll become heavy. It's that simple. If you focus on what God is doing through them, they'll lose weight. I'll say that again. If you focus on the afflictions, they'll become heavy. But if you focus on what God is doing through them, they'll lose weight. Really, whatever it is that's going through, what happens is you You need to see God through it and through God's eyes. There's just no comparison